ABC News. This week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts.
With Osama bin Laden still at large, his whereabouts apparently unknown, the president vows to keep up the pressure.
Make no mistake about it, we're in hot pursuit.
As reports emerge of U.S. activity in Afghanistan, we'll ask the leader of America's military, General Henry Shelton, has the offensive already begun?
Plus, to what extent will Saudi Arabia, a key Arab ally, help in this operation? We'll speak with Saudi Ambassador Prince Bandar in his first interview since September 11th.
And if Afghanistan's Taliban rulers fall, will the country's exiled king return to play a key role? George Stephanopoulos has the latest.
That's This Week, featuring George Will. And joining the roundtable, ABC's Claire Shipman. Now from Washington, Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts.
Welcome to our program. The man who was almost president, Al Gore, stepped back into the limelight last night at a Democratic dinner in Des Moines. Gore had planned this coming-out appearance for weeks, intending to make a case that suggested the country needs new leadership. But that speech was scrapped in favor of a strong statement of support for President Bush.
George W. Bush is my commander-in-chief. This country is more united than at any time I can remember in my whole lifetime.
Well, united in the hunt for the terrorists, which continues this weekend on two fronts. Our chief investigative reporter, Brian Ross, has the latest on the FBI's investigation. Brian, what's new?
Well, good morning, Sam. The investigation is divided into two areas: what happened on September 11th and what might happen next, and that's getting by far the most attention. Of greatest concern, terror strikes that may be planned are already underway, including, ABC News has been told, intelligence information that American tourists overseas, particularly in Asia, could be targeted for kidnappings or assassinations. As to September 11th, federal authorities have told ABC News they have now tracked more than $100,000 from banks in Pakistan to two banks in Florida to accounts held by suspected hijack ringleader Mohammed Atta. As well, this morning, Time magazine is reporting that some of that money came in the days just before the attack and can be traced directly to people connected to Osama bin Laden. It's all part of what has been a successful FBI effort so far to close in on the hijackers' high command, the money men, the planners, and the mastermind, Sam.
Thank you, Brian. Brian Ross. And in Afghanistan, the hunt goes on for the man pinpointed as the terrorist mastermind, Osama bin Laden. The Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, Abdul Salam Zaif, is quoted by the Associated Press as saying bin Laden is under the control of Taliban security officials at an unspecified location for his safety and security, the ambassador says, who goes on to claim the Taliban leadership doesn't know where that is. Only the security forces do. Well, it's against this background that some last-ditch efforts to get the Taliban to cooperate are being made. More on that from ABC's Mike Lee inside northern Afghanistan.
There is supposed to be another delegation of Islamic leaders headed for the capital to talk to the Taliban, but in recent days they've had absolutely no luck. The Taliban has refused to hand over Osama bin Laden. Taliban radio reports that over the weekend there have been huge meetings across the country in 8 provinces and, quote, the participants are prepared for jihad, holy war. The Taliban leader, Mohammed Omar, is also quoted as saying he does not expect a U.S. strike because, he says, there is no reason for an attack, but he gave no specifics. The trial of 8 foreigners is supposed to get underway again today. They're accused of trying to convert Afghans to Christianity, among them 2 Americans. One of the other defendants has a sister in Australia. She has appealed to the United Nations and to the United States not to attack Afghanistan until those aid workers are free. A Gulf Arab radio station is sticking by its report that 5 U.S. troops have been captured inside the country near the Iranian border. Both Washington and the Taliban deny that report. There's no sign of any U.S. forces here on the ground, but of course if they're here, they would be out of sight conducting intelligence operations. For This Week, I'm Mike Lee in northern Afghanistan.
Thanks to Mike Lee. And joining us now is General Hugh Shelton, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Your last day in that role, General Shelton.
The last day, Cokie, and delighted to be here with you this morning.
Well, thank you so much for coming in this morning. You've just heard Mike Lee saying that there's still reports that some U.S. forces have been captured or shot at in Afghanistan. True?
Well, Koki, this is is going to have to be a multifaceted, multidimensional campaign, and of necessity, the operational security, the intelligence networks that we have it'll be a very different type of operation. And so throughout this morning, I'll have to be very generic in responding to some of these operational issues to include that one. So we won't have any comment about the reports that are coming out of the Middle East.
Well, what about in this morning's papers the fact that 28,000 troops, 24 warships, 300 warplanes are in the area around Iraq and Afghanistan? Are we positioning ourselves, if necessary, to get in?
Well, I think that, as you know, for 50 years, we've maintained a sizable force in the Middle East in support of our partners, our allies in the region, as well as to protect America's national interests. And so commenting on what types of forces we may have deployed or when we would do it, et cetera, is something that I think only serves to aid and abet the terrorist organizations that are the target of our efforts in this war on terrorism.
You were head of the Special Operations Force, and we've had reports of Special Operations Forces being in and maybe out of Afghanistan, doing some work there. But let me just ask you, aside, since you're not going to tell us that, what the challenges are. The president has said they're going to go in and smoke Osama bin Laden out. How do they do that?
Well, first and foremost, I think, as you look at a terrorist organization, it is an organization that of its very nature requires a different approach. It requires a multifaceted approach, a multidimensional approach, using all the elements of our national power, diplomatic, political, economic, as well as our military capabilities. We have great capabilities across the whole spectrum of conflict, ranging from peacekeeping operations, special operations, as well as conventional operations. This says that we'll use some parts of each one of these systems that we have, and we will take it to the enemy. We will, in fact, strive to eliminate, to defeat the terrorists that have brought about these very brutal attacks on our citizens.
There are particular problems in Afghanistan, however. There are landmines. Apparently, it's the most landmined country on earth. We in the United States supplied them with Stinger missiles when they were fighting the Soviet Union. Are those particular problems when you try to introduce special forces into Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, as an assumption that we're going to introduce special forces into Afghanistan, which I won't comment on one way or the other, but suffice it to say, we understand the nature of our adversary, the terrorist organizations. We have no war with the Afghan people, and we will do everything we can within our power to make sure that we can help the Afghan people. But we also are going to go after those that harbor, that aid, that abet, that assist, or in any other way support a terrorist organization. But if you remember back to the Desert Shield, Desert Storm days, many painted the Iraqis during that period as 10 feet tall. We don't think the Taliban or those that are harboring the terrorists anywhere are 10 feet tall. We've got over 100 nations now that are in support, an international coalition in support of going after these terrorist organizations. And so it'll be not only America and America's political, diplomatic, economic, military power that will be applied, but it'll be an international effort that will also bring in the great capabilities of our partners, our allies, and our friends around the world.
There's a question of patience here, though, General, and let me refer you to a quotation from a former member of the National Security Council. The smart thing to do is wait until spring, when you'd have tons of intelligence, forces set in place and ready to go, and 8 months of uninterrupted good weather to run an operation. But it's unclear whether domestic and international politics would sustain such a long wait. You do have to keep people behind you. How do you do that and fight the smartest war?
Well, I think, first of all, that the American people fully understand right now that we are going after the terrorists and that this will require a sustained campaign. This will not be a conventional war. It will not be a war in which you can show large formations of tanks or artillery or whatever. In fact, a terrorist organization by its nature are individuals, small cells, organizations that are very dispersed, in this particular case with just the one organization, with the Al-Qaeda, the Osama bin Laden organization. Some 50 to 60 nations that they operate in. They use fronts to support their organization. We're going to go after them, but again, not just with military. We have law enforcement.
So is it a mistake to call it a war?
Oh, I don't think it's a mistake to call it a war. I think, in fact, what we saw delivered on our American citizens and indeed the international community, the 80 nations, was an act of war from a terrorist standpoint. And therefore, we've got to go after those that host, house, help, assist, or whatever. And that's the world of terrorism.
The Time magazine has taken a poll that comes out tomorrow asking people if the U.S. military action against Afghanistan would make terrorist attacks on the United States more likely in the next 12 months. Almost 2/3 say yes. Is that a danger, that the American public is fearful that going after these people will bring further attacks upon us?
I think that you always worry about organizations or worry about a response that you may receive from anyone, but that should not stand in the way of doing what is right and what is best for American citizens for the long term. And not only American citizens, but for the international community, for the civilized world. And as we've seen, tremendous outpouring of support from nations all over the world
to go after these organizations. Do you think
it's
it's likely to bring more terrorist attacks?
I believe that you always have to be concerned, and certainly we must take that into consideration, that a terrorist may try to respond, but that should not prevent us from doing what's right. And ultimately, we'll be much safer for the future if we go after those who harbor and support and carry out these terrorist acts, as we're seeing today.
It's time for the quadrennial review of the military, and now there are new realities. There's talk that maybe there will be new military roles. For instance, a Homeland Defense section in the Army. Is that something that you would support?
Not only support, but it's something that we've been preparing for quite some time. We went back after the September 11th attack and looked at the Quadrennial Defense Review. And needless to say, we were happy when we looked at it that we had given it the proper amount of attention. But it didn't just start with the Quadrennial Defense Review. In fact, 2 years ago, we recognized the need to start protecting our nation, our citizens, against asymmetric or attacks to the homeland. We looked at cyber warfare, and we stood up a command to deal with that. We increased our chemical and biological capabilities to deal with those types of attack, as well as an ability to respond in support of lead federal agencies of our government. And we envision that becoming even stronger in the days ahead.
We're about out of time here, but I want to ask you a couple of personal things. One, what is it like to make these decisions in a Pentagon where there are bodies still in the rubble a few hundred feet away?
Well, first of all, when you drive up to the Pentagon today, there's a reminder of the tremendous sacrifices that our men and women in uniform give day in and day out, many of which in the Pentagon gave the ultimate sacrifice, as well as many of our other citizens in the World Trade Center, and as they do around the world almost on a daily basis. But it also is a reminder of the great contributions that our armed forces make to peace and security around the world, to stability within the regions, and that increases the economic prosperity, the peace that our citizens, as well as others in the regions around the world, enjoy. And we're very proud to contribute to that.
As I understand it, you were flying back when this attack happened.
Well, I was headed overseas that morning, and when I heard the second plane had hit the World Trade Center, it became obvious what was underway, and we started trying to turn around. It took a little while to get the clearances to turn around, but ultimately made it back in.
And you saw the World Trade Center from the air?
I did. I flew over the World Trade Center. I saw the devastation that had been brought upon the international community in that attack. And then, of course, walked out that afternoon and looked at the Pentagon and realized that we had work to do. And that work is in progress as we speak.
General, at midnight tonight, you hand over command to General Richard Myers. I've noticed that retired General Downing is going to join Tom Ridge in the Homeland Security. Retired General Zinni is going to the State Department as an advisor. Will you stay on in some advisory role?
Well, my role in the future will remain, is to be determined. However, I feel very good about turning over the job tonight at midnight to a great warrior, a leader, Dick Myers, a guy with great vision, who I am confident will lead our armed forces to victory in this latest challenge that America faces, and certainly feel good about the leadership that he brings to the position.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, General Shelton.
Thank you.
Still ahead, how Afghanistan's exiled king is handling the current crisis and the roundtable. But first, when we come back, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the U.S. tells Sam Donaldson how his country is helping the fight on terrorism. Stay with us.
Joining us now is His Royal Highness Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdul Aziz, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning, Sam.
Always good to see you.
Thank you.
In 1991, Saudi Arabia and the United States were as one in the effort to expel Iraq from Kuwait. Would you say in this new war of terrorism, the two countries are as one, or are there some differences?
I can absolutely, with great confidence, tell you that Saudi Arabia and the United States are as one in the fight against this ugly, evil acts of terrorism. And that this is not just the United States responsibility. This is a worldwide phenomenon. And we, with our American friends, stood with us in 1990-91, and we are standing firm with them today in this fight.
Well, as you know, in recent days, between Washington and Riyadh, there's been a discussion over the use of the Prince Sultan Air Base south of Riyadh, very important command and control center and air base. Let me show you what your defense minister is quoted as saying this weekend about that. We do not accept the presence in our country of a single soldier at war with Muslims or Arabs. How should we interpret that?
The truth of the matter is that our discussion with our American friends is steady, and it is in total agreement between us and them. And this quote you just read to me, I have not read it yet, so I don't know exactly where does that, is it out of context or what? But we have not been asked for using of the bases in Saudi Arabia, and therefore this is hypothetical for me to answer it one way or another.
Let me just try to parse that a little bit, Mr.
Okay.
Ambassador. Are you saying you've not been asked for the bases to be used for an offensive military operation, that is, planes flying off? Or are you saying that even for use as a command and control center, you've not been asked?
No, I'm just saying that the United States government is in the process of putting all its plans together. And whatever we have been asked so far, we were cooperating with it. As General Shelton said, this is an unconventional attack, and it requires unconventional response. And the response is not necessarily all military. In fact, the military segment of it is much smaller than, let's say, in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. There is economical, there is political, and there is intelligence. And in my judgment, the President of the United States have achieved in less than 2 weeks what took us in 1990 during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, about 3 months to get a coalition of 33 countries. Less than 2 weeks, the President of the United States of America, through a diplomatic offensive, lined up 100 countries with you. Now, this war is not for the faint-hearted. This is a long war. This is going to be require patience and steadiness.
But I'm trying to find out how many soldiers will enlist to do what. One more question on the air base. Are you saying that you have said to Washington unofficially, please don't ask us because we might have to turn you down, and therefore Washington wouldn't ask, when in fact Washington would like to have that air base?
No, it doesn't work that way. Allies, and when they are fighting an enemy, they just look at the threat and look what's the best way to handle it and agree on it.
Well, if Washington says this is the best way, sir, to use your air base,
but
what would be
Washington
the
has not
response?
said that, Sam. That's my point. My point is people are trying to find an argument, and we don't have an argument. Everybody is busy between the two countries to go after the bad guys. We should not change the atmosphere that we are arguing between us. We are trying to unite to fight an ugly and dangerous enemy.
Okay. Until recently, you were a great supporter, Saudi Arabia was, of the Taliban in Afghanistan. But now you've broken relations with the Taliban.
Correct.
Question. President Bush says the Taliban must suffer the same fate as Osama bin Laden if it is in fact harboring him, and all the evidence suggests it is. Would you agree to an attack on the Taliban?
Of course, our position, the fact that we broke diplomatic relationship with them, is the best answer to your question. Anyone who
Is the answer yes?
Anyone who harbors terrorism or terrorists and does not cooperate with the international community should have to pay a price. And remember, again, within 2 weeks, the United States of America, the President's foreign policy and Secretary Powell activities, they have achieved 2 resolutions already from the United Nations, from the Security Council, unanimous. And I think, I don't know why you don't want to take a yes for an answer. You are winning this war, Sam, so why are we arguing about the what-ifs instead of going after the bad guys? That's where we want to go.
I would never argue with you, sir, but I take it then that the answer to the question of if the United States moves to remove the Taliban as the ruling power in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia would say, yes, that's fine.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. The point I'm trying to tell you is we are united. We are going after the same enemy, which is the terrorists and whoever harm them or support them. And why do you want me to make a position now when the United States of America itself has not reached that point yet?
Well, sir,
this is a unconventional enemy.
President Bush, of course, has said that terrorists, wherever they are found that have a global reach, are going to be pinpointed. Many Americans and American officials, as you know, say that's Saddam Hussein. They want to strike Iraq. They want to strike Hamas. They want to strike Hezbollah. Would you think that going after those people who have been labeled as terrorists are a correct position, and would you support that?
The discussion that we have been having with our friends in the United States and in the international community was to go first after the perpetrators of the attack on the United States of America, and then look at the lay of the land, see how effective our diplomatic initiatives are, our economic initiatives are, and make a decision. This is what I'm trying to say is, in Desert Storm, we knew what we wanted to do. There was an occupation, a country was occupied, there is an aggressive army. We wanted to take them out. Right now, you're listening to some, for example, condemnation to this from countries like Iran, like Syria, like Libya. You are getting allies from all kind of, from all around the world against this threat. You are succeeding. We are succeeding. And the world is rallying around America. Let's keep it that way. Let's fight the enemy until we get to the end.
Mr. Ambassador, there's some evidence that perhaps 12 of the people who committed suicide, the terrorists on these planes, were either Saudi nationals or had ties with Saudi Arabia. There's some evidence that money had flowed through organizations within your country. Is your government working to stop that money and to root out any potential terrorists who participated in this attack?
Absolutely. We have no reservations on that. But here is the interesting thing. We don't have anything to work with as to an individual or an organization that Saudi Arabia is connected with it. And there are maybe a facade, maybe there are fronts for this kind of things. But you know something? Most of the money that goes out recycled in these areas through charities and so on comes through the United States of America. We can trace it all the way to Europe. When it comes here, your laws do not allow anybody to investigate. So all of us have to join this fight.
But you know that the president has now frozen assets in this country and has said that any foreign bank or financial institution that harbors terrorist money will have their assets frozen in this country.
And
Does
I
that
think
bother
he
you?
did. No, I think that is an excellent idea, and we support it. Plus, the United Nations Security Council yesterday issued an international edict that makes this obligatory to all countries in the world. Next week, we are having some senior officials from our finance ministry to come and discuss with their counterpart how to cooperate on this area. We don't have a problem there.
We're out of time almost, but you met Osama bin Laden once, didn't you? Because the bin Laden family is a family that in Saudi Arabia is very substantial. They have a construction company. Tell us about this man.
Well, when I met him was early in the mid-'80s, I guess. And actually, this is irony. He came to thank me for getting the support of the United States of America to help our Mujahideen brothers in Afghanistan.
Against the Soviets.
Against the Soviets. I was not impressed by him at that time. And I think he freaked out. I think he is a loose cannon now. And I think he does not represent Islam or what Islam teaches. So he's a pariah now, and anyone who supports him is a pariah. But for a long time, Sam, we've been asking our friends to look out for some of those people with such ideas. And they are in Europe. They are in Europe, and some of them are in America. And we were told those are dissidents. Of course they are dissidents, but the American people must understand. Those are not asking for Jeffersonian democracy in Saudi Arabia. Those people want to send us back 1,000 years, and we won't let them. Any anger on your Arab or Muslim friends, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, is an anger that will satisfy them. Don't aid and abet those SOBs. Let's stick together and fight them, because we are on the right track.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I think it's fair to point out that you have cut off the citizenship of this man, Osama bin Laden, in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
He's
and
no
his
longer a
family,
citizen.
and his family has disowned him.
All right. Thanks very much,
Thank
Prince
you, sir.
Bandar, for being with us today. Come back, won't you?
I will.
All right. Still ahead, the George Will commentary. But first, when we come back, Afghanistan's exiled royal family on a nation in chaos and its future relationship with the United States. Right after this.
Well, as both of our guests have said this morning, this war on terrorism will be fought on many fronts. And one of them is the question of what happens to the government of Afghanistan. George Stephanopoulos has traveled to Rome to bring us the latest on that. George?
Thanks, Koki. I am here at a small villa in suburban Rome that is the home of King Mohammed Zahir Shah, the 87-year-old exiled king of Afghanistan. The king hasn't held power since 1973, but today he said he's prepared to return to Afghanistan to help create a broad-based coalition government that would have free and democratic elections eventually. Now, for that to happen, of course, the Taliban must go. So today, the king also told a visiting congressional delegation that he would support U.S. military action to help remove the Taliban. And perhaps more important, he met with and is preparing to join forces with the military commanders of the Northern Alliance. That's the rebel groups that have been fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan for the last 7 years from their bases in northern Afghanistan. The king has never met with all the commanders before, and earlier today I asked him what he hoped to gain with this conference.
Afghanistan needs the disunity has caused a lot of problems in Afghanistan, and we have to all unite and cooperate with each other in order to take our country forward. We have many problems ahead of us still. Economic problems. Unity, problems of unity. I'm hoping that they will unite together.
Joining us now is Prince Mustafa Zahir Shah, the king's grandson and spokesman. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We saw the king say that you've been in these meetings with him today. He talked that he wanted unity. In these meetings with the Northern Alliance, have they yet come to a formal agreement to join forces?
Well, surely they might be coming to a formal agreement to join forces. His Majesty has appealed for the unity of the Afghan nation. I think we are at a critical juncture in the history of our country. And His Majesty would like to, as a symbolic figure, as a father figure, unite all the various different groups of Afghanistan to take Afghanistan out of this calamity.
The members of Congress who met with the king today also said that the king was asking for help from the United States. What specifically does the king need from the United States, from President Bush?
Well, ostensibly, the scope of the help was humanitarian because, as you know, in the last 3 years, there's been a consecutive drought in the country. He's worried about the oncoming winter and the fate of the people there. So the first help that he would need probably would be humanitarian to alleviate a disaster coming this winter. And then, of course, the other help would be American political support for the Loya Jirga process, for this conference, for it to be a successful story. The United States being a world leader, there's power in the world that's needed to back this program, as well as the international community in realizing peace, security, and stability in Afghanistan.
Now, our sources in the meeting also said, though, that the Northern Alliance would like at least some limited military support.
Well, they'll probably need some form of logistical support because we want to emphasize this, that this must be an inter-Afghan thing. We believe that the Afghans can do the job, but along they probably would need some of the tools to do the job to combat terrorism.
So that means weapons, materiel?
It means material, yes.
Now, in the past, the United States has been reluctant to support the king's process because of the concerns of Pakistan. They're against a monarchy. They've been opposed to the Northern Alliance. What kind of reassurance can the king offer to Pakistan?
Well, I can assure you right now, and we can give the assurances to Pakistan, that first of all, when the former king goes back, he will not be going back as the king of Afghanistan. His role will be defined by the people of Afghanistan in a very democratic manner. Secondly, to Pakistan, we want to say to Pakistan that Pakistan is our neighbor. Pakistan looked after 2.5 million refugees. We have no problems with the people of Pakistan. But Pakistan must realize that the Afghan people must be empowered to choose their own destiny, their own way of life according to their own free will. And they can cooperate, and we can assure Pakistan that Afghanistan will be friendly to all its neighbors, and we have cultural ties, we have border ties, not just with Pakistan, with Iran, with all the northern neighbors of Afghanistan. Whatever comes out of this would honor all its agreements and would be friendly to all the nations of the world, including our neighbors.
Is the king prepared to make a formal declaration that the Afghan people should rise up and remove the Taliban from power?
Well, I think the king has made his position clear, and he will be having a very important statement to be made in the next 48 hours.
The next 48 hours?
Yes.
Can you give us any preview?
I cannot know.
Finally, you know, some of the king's critics have said that he can't be an effective leader because he's been out of the country for so long, 27 years. He's not fluent in Pashto. He's simply out of touch. What's your response to that criticism?
My response is very simple. Yes, he has been out of the country for 27 years. No, he has not been out of touch. He has been, in fact, in touch with his people for the last 27 years. For the last 11 years, I'm a witness, phone calls, satellite calls to Afghanistan, from Afghanistan. He talks to various personalities. For instance, to give an example, he was talking to General Massoud, who was assassinated 3 weeks later by a group of terrorists there. And that's, of course, linked, we believe, to the calamity that took place in New York. Now, it's not the king that's pushing himself, it's the people calling him. Yes, he is 87 years old, but he's got the charisma, he's got the trust of the Afghan people. He certainly got the approval and the support of the Afghan people behind him. The latest polls that were conducted back 2 months ago, they conducted a poll of 4,900 people across 27 provinces, and they put his popularity well over 75% in urban rural areas, and at 95% in the city of Kabul. Then Mr. Vendrell, the United Nations Secretary General's Special Representative for Afghanistan, indicated a month ago that the king's popularity was at 87. When he came to Rome, he had upped that to 89. So I don't think the king had all this popularity during his 40-year reign in Afghanistan.
Okay, one final question. Is the king prepared to make a direct plea to President Bush for United States support?
Well, His Majesty has already sent a letter to President Bush. President Bush had sent one of his senior envoys here to Rome to meet with the king and thank for the letter. And I think there will be another communication with the President of the United States.
Prince Mustafa, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Koki?
Thanks, George. Still ahead, the roundtable. George Will and Claire Shipman join us after this.
Time now for our roundtable. Opinions here. You decide which ones you agree with. And joining us as always, George Will. Hello, George.
My leader.
And ABC's Claire Shipman. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Sam.
Really good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Well, the president set a number of aims in a number of his speeches. And the question is there division within the administration as to which ones we begin with and, in fact, which ones we end with, George?
Well, if there is a division, and some of this division that is being talked about in the press could be real, it could be disinformation to confound our enemies. But if the division exists, it's between those who believe that you can go after needles in the haystack or go after the haystack. In other words, regimes are responsible for what happens on their territory. If terrorists are there, go after the regimes. The questions about Colin Powell, which is what this comes down to, date back, first of all, to the pre-Desert Storm period when he was reluctant to proceed with offensive plans. And second, goes back to last week on this program. Let's see, there's a clip here of what he said here about the Taliban regime.
Right now, I'm not going to say that it has become one of the objectives of the United States government to either remove or put in place a different regime.
While he was saying that, Condoleezza Rice on another network was saying that people would certainly be a lot better off without that ghastly regime.
Claire, what do you make of this?
Well, there's clearly been a struggle going on, and I think it's been going on since the beginning of this administration. In a lot of ways, it's a typical State Department defense struggle. But I think what's interesting in this case is that it looks as though right now Colin Powell has won, that he has the critical backing of Vice President Cheney in this, and we're told behind the scenes George Bush Sr., which helps. So I think if you look at what the arguments are on both sides, it's should we act quickly or slowly, unilaterally, multilaterally? Should it be broad action, i.e. Iraq, or not? Just try it for narrow targets. And right now, with all of the coalition building going on, it's very clear that Colin Powell is ruling.
Well, and you say it might be disinformation, but you can get some pretty heated conversations going on in this city right now. So there is a genuine argument going on. But as you say, it appears that Powell has won for the moment. It's interesting, though, you say defense state. In the last several years, it's really been the people at defense who have been more timid. That was certainly true when Weinberger was at defense and Schultz was at state. And this now with Powell having gone to state, it's changed that calculation. But I do think that you have this sense that people want to go in, they want to fight, they want to have a war, but who do you fight?
Well, let me ask this question. If bin Laden's head is served up on that platter the Vice President talked about, will that sort of tamp things down so that the American people say, we got him and his associates, and then the people who want to say, let's now get Saddam Hussein, let's get Hamas, let's get the other terrorists, will not have much of a purchase?
Sam, a few years ago, we mounted a huge manhunt for the world's foremost criminal, Pablo Escobar. Found him. He was one of the heads of the cocaine cartels in Colombia. Killed him. Cocaine still flowed into the country. And the same is true with terrorism. You stop bin Laden, there'll still be a terrorist
problem. But I'm
problem.
not asking whether, in fact, I think you're right, George, getting one person stops terrorism. What I'm asking is whether the American people will then say, well, that's great, we did it, and not really support the kind of push.
The answer is it depends, and it depends on what happens next. Look, it continues to be the case that we heard Brian Ross at the beginning of this program, that there might be further actions. That is, everything is dependent on that. And seeing if something else happens, then the response is going to be completely different.
And how long it might take, if it ever happens, to get bin Laden. And there is still a strong coalition for, at some point, looking at Saddam Hussein. I don't think that's going to go away.
Yes, a modest proposal. We're spending lots of money to enforce a no-fly zone over a portion of Iraq. Why don't we put a rival government on the ground underneath that expensive no-fly zone?
Well, it would take a lot of force, I suppose. And you heard the ambassador from Saudi Arabia. He danced very carefully, but it seemed to me what he was saying was, we support this particular effort, but don't necessarily count on us for some wider war.
But of course that gets back to what happened at the end of the Persian Gulf War. And part of what you're seeing here is the playing out of that argument still going on.
I was going to say the person who most wants to go after Saddam Hussein, Paul Wolfowitz, who wanted to do it then, and he'd still like to get in there and finish the unfinished business.
Secretary of Defense.
Speaking of division, at the moment we have no public division on this subject, meaning the war against terrorism on Capitol Hill. But Koki, there are some divisions on the stimulus package on exactly how to handle the airline package and other matters.
There are, but I predict that you will see them disappear quite quickly. And the fact is that the leaders in Congress and the White House are singing off the same songbook. President Bush flew back from Chicago this week with House Democratic leader Dick Gephardt. They had what's been described as a very useful conversation. And I think there are just a couple of little things that will fall into place. The White House needs to come in and formally say we want more money for education and for emergency spending, and the Congress will pass all the spending bills and say that's great. And the
forget the lockbox.
All of that.
Goodbye, lockbox.
And the president will say. And the president will say, yes, you can have some minimum wage adjustment for workers and health benefits and unemployment benefits, and yes, some tax cuts.
Congress together.
Well, I think so. And they're running out of time. There aren't that many legislative days left. Things like the Patient's Bill of Rights, who can sue whom for how much where, that big argument, looks pretty peripheral now.
It's a difficult time for the Democrats, even if they wanted to do something else. When you have George Bush walking out and giving Tom Daschle a big bear hug at the end of his speech. How easy is it going to be for the Democrats to want to
I actually think they're finding it an easy time for them because, first of all, in polling, their re-elect numbers of a Democratic Congress are up. But here's a much more important number, I think. This Washington Post poll, do you trust government to do the right thing? Just about always, most of the time. That combined number comes to 64%. We have not seen a number like that since 1966, folks. And if you think the Democrats are the party of government, that's a good thing for them.
Let's talk about getting back to normal. You say, well, how can I talk about that? We're still in shock. We're still aggrieved. Well, the president led the way last week by saying, get back to your routines, hug your children. And something interesting happened on Saturday Night Live on NBC last night. The mayor of New York was there, Lorne Michaels, who is the, of course, creator of the show. And this little exchange occurred.
Can we be funny? Why start now?
Well, I guess the question is, can we laugh at jokes now? I don't mean inappropriate jokes, but can we smile without people saying, oh, how dare they do that after what happened on the 11th of September?
Well, people are going to smile. We are going to get back to normal. There's a little town of Poolsville out in Maryland where there's a pumpkin patch where every year kindergarten kids and first graders come and get their Halloween pumpkins. Someone in the Montgomery County school system canceled that. Why? I don't think bin Laden's after the Poolsville pumpkin patch.
I don't know. Pumpkin patches have played an interesting role in our history.
Let's use some judgment.
I think what's interesting is that the White House is trying to push a mixed message, which is get back to normal, go to Disney World, get on planes. But by the way, there are going to be
Sky
Marshals and the National Guard there at the same time.
And you can't fly out of National Airport.
Yeah, National Airport is still closed. It's a difficult balance.
You know, Cokie, what I'm finding is I had 2 or 3 things on my calendar for mid-October that were immediately canceled, and we all thought that was terrific. Now people are putting things on the calendar for mid-October of like quality.
Well, I think that, but everybody's walking a fine line. And when you ask about humor, some humor is now wildly inappropriate. And I think that all of the shows are having a little bit of a problem with that. And people beating up on politicians are having a little bit of a problem with that as well.
Speaking of beating up on people, Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, I guess has decided now not to go to Afghanistan on a mission of peace, George.
Well, first he started out in an argument with the Taliban over who invited whom, and Americans wound up believing the Taliban, quite reasonably. I think, Sam, it may be a sign of a real change in America's sensibility that his vaudeville act has finally gone terminally stale.
Well, I want to remind you of something, George. He went to Syria and brought out an American pilot who was held. He went to Yugoslavia when Milosevic was in charge and brought out 3 American soldiers who'd been held. Remember, there are 2 American women who are in jail in Kabul for preaching Christianity. And I say...
Allegedly.
Well, if he'd gone there and been able to bring them out, I think it would have been great.
Well, he can be frustratingly successful, I think, for whichever administration is in charge at the time. But you have a sense he realizes this might not be the time to be traveling to Afghanistan.
Yes, but we will hear from him eventually.
Yes, even if he can't dial 1-800-TALIBAN.
Thank you very much, all. Just ahead, George Will be back with his commentary. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us.
Well, in this war on many fronts, George Will, you have a war on words.
Well, Cokie, it's often been said that in a war, the first casualty is truth, and one of the ways you attack the truth is by corrupting the integrity of language, which I suggest Reuters News Service has done by saying that they will not now use the word terrorist. This is what they've said. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. We abstain from judgment and believe that the word terrorist is a loaded term, preferring to use a more specific word such as gunman, bomber, etc. Well, let's look at this for a minute. Loaded term, certainly terrorist has a pejorative connotation, so does rapist, fascist, assassin, murderer. So what? Now, Reuters says we're going to use a more specific word. Well, terrorist is a noun that denotes something very specific. Someone who inflicts violence randomly, and randomly against civilians. Now, are there questionable cases as to whether terrorist applies here or there? Of course. There are questionable cases as to what counts as a cookie, but we don't ban the word cookie. Now, Clearly, if we're going to use the word terrorist at all, we can probably agree that it fits someone who flies a commercial airliner into a skyscraper. I think it's time, perhaps, that we took a warning from this man. This is George Orwell, who in 1946, in an essay called Politics in the English Language, said, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. I suggest that Reuters has been corrupting our language by saying terrorist is somehow uniquely judgmental. And I have a suggestion. Throughout this crisis, when you see a story on the crisis by Reuters, skip the story. Cokie?
Thank you, George. Sam and I will be back with some carefully thought out words after this.